Welcome to all of you to today's regular press briefing. It's the second one, and I have to apologize for the delay. My name is Marie-Agnes Heine, and I'm the head of the Communication Department of the European Medicines Agency, EMA. As you know, we are holding now these regular press briefings to update you on the most recent developments regarding COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. However, today we will also be able to cover some late-breaking news, as our Human Medicines Committee, the CHMP, just concluded on the use of Comirnaty in adolescents aged 12 to 15. So let's get started. I'm delighted to have three colleagues here with me. Dr. Marco Cavalieri, the head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy, Dr. Fergus Sweeney, the head of Clinical Studies and Manufacturing Task Force, and Dr. Georgi Genov, the head of Pharmacovigilance. As usual, your microphone is disabled for the duration of the briefing. Initially, Dr. Cavalieri will inform you about the outcome of the CHMP meeting today and also provide you with an update on recent developments. Then we will have about half an hour for questions. Today's briefing is being broadcast by YouTube and Europe by satellite. The footage can, as always, be used free of charge by all media, and you will find the respective links in the invite you received. I'm now handing over to EMA's head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy, Dr. Cavalieri. Please.
Thank you very much, Marie-Agnes. So thank you very much for taking the time to attend this press briefing today. I will start at least with the latest news, as indeed anticipated, which is that the EMA Scientific Committee for Human Medicine, the CHMP, has today approved the use of the vaccines from Pfizer BioNTech, which is called Comirnaty, in adolescents from 12 to 15 years. The vaccine, as you know, was already authorized in people from the age of 16 and above. And now we have data that would show that the vaccine is safe also in the age 12 to 15 years, and that has allowed the scientific committee indeed to conclude today. This opinion from the scientific committee now will be transmitted to the European Commission, which will issue the final approval. However, it will be then up to each individual member state to decide if and when to use this vaccine in adolescents in the future. Extending the protection of a safe and effective vaccine in this younger population is an important step forward in the fight against this pandemic. And so we recognize this important achievement. Just to say that the recommended use of the Comirnaty vaccine in these adolescents will be along the same line as for older individuals, which means that 2 doses are required and should be administered with an interval of at least 3 weeks. The effect of Comirnaty in this age group has been determined based on a clinical trial that recruited approximately 2,000 adolescents in this age group. And the data demonstrate that the immune response in this age group are similar or even better than what we are seeing in young adults. And importantly, none of the vaccinated children in this group got COVID-19, so got infected by the virus, while there was 16 cases in the control group following the 2 doses of the placebo that developed COVID-19. These data are really showing that the vaccine is highly protective in this population in preventing the disease. From a safety perspective, the vaccine was well tolerated, and the side effects in this age group were very much similar than what we've seen in young adults, and not raising major concern at this point in time. As always, the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine needs to be continuously monitored post-approval and during the vaccination campaign, and this is something that we are continuously doing through the EU pharmacovigilance system, through studies that are conducted by the company and studies that are conducted by European authorities. Now, let me move to another important aspect, which is with respect to the importance of having an increased supply of COVID-19 vaccine in order to allow effective vaccine rollout during the vaccination campaigns that are ongoing. And in this sense, we are working to authorize the expansion of the manufacturing capacity and also, whenever possible, to increase flexibility in the storage condition of the vaccine. And this is for the benefit of the vaccination campaign in the European Union, but also behind. For example, we recently approved a 31-day storage period for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine at normal fridge temperature, which will significantly benefit the flexibility, the logistics and the handling of the vaccine, and also reduce any wastage that could be associated. These vaccines, as you know, are urgently needed, and we are expediting our procedures in order to make sure that the approval of further manufacturing sites will occur as swiftly as possible. Our recent efforts have helped to stabilise the supply situation in Europe and speed up vaccination campaigns. We are also in touch with vaccine developers to discuss vaccine strains and the potential use of a booster dose in order to determine what could be the best timing and what could be the best strategy in this respect. We have seen some preliminary data so far, and we are waiting for more data to be available in the near future. And it does not appear at the moment that we need to rush into giving a third dose. But we still need more evidence, and we will be collecting this evidence in the coming weeks and months to come up with a clear-cut position in this regard. I would also like to mention something about treatment of COVID-19, and we are continually looking into potential treatment for COVID-19 along the line of the therapeutic strategy that has been proposed by the European Commission, and we really hope that we will be able to authorize new therapeutics before the end of this year. In particular, as you know, there are 4 antiviral monoclonal antibodies that are under rolling review, and we are looking forward to having the possibility of approving at least a few of them during the 3rd or 4th quarter of this year. And also to mention that one of these monoclonal antibodies under rolling review has recently received a scientific opinion for emergency use, so that to give another agent that could be rapidly used to decrease the burden of disease associated with COVID-19. You can also have a look at our website, and we have just published an overview of all the therapeutics that are currently under review by the EMA. And to conclude, you may have also noticed that we issued a statement with regard to the use of inhaled corticosteroids. At the moment, there is insufficient evidence to recommend the use of these agents in the context of patients with COVID-19 that are not yet hospitalized and are not in need of supplemental oxygen. And although these studies are not showing any particular reason of concern, we cannot exclude that there is a potential harm with the use of these agents in the early phases of COVID-19 in patients that indeed are not yet requiring supplemental oxygen. And therefore, we are advising against their use until we get more evidence that will tell us exactly whether these agents are beneficial or harmful. Thank you very much. I will stop here in case you have questions.
Many thanks, Dr. Cavalieri. We are now taking questions from the floor. You know the routine. If you wish to ask a question, please click on the emoticon icon at the bottom of the WebEx window to raise your hand. When I give you the floor, please unmute yourself, and you can then ask your question. So the first question is from Jillian Deutsch from Politico. Jillian, please.
Hi, thanks so much for giving me the floor. I want to ask about the decision today on the impact on the global access of vaccines. Obviously, all of you understand the importance of global access to vaccines, but I was wondering if you have any comment on the fact that this decision today paves the way for more wealthy countries to use the vaccine on children when many elderly and healthcare workers still have not gotten vaccines in many countries in the world. Thank you.
Many thanks, Jillian. I'm going to give this question to Dr. Fergus Sweeney.
So good afternoon, and thank you for the question. What's important to emphasise is that the role of the EMA is to assess the scientific available evidence, or the available scientific evidence, I should say, that would support the safe and effective use of vaccines in the different populations, and to give an opinion on that. Our opinion is based on that objective evidence coming from clinical trials or other tests and sources. We then make that available as an objective reference for public health authorities, who can then make the decisions in member states and in other parts of the world that may rely on our decisions in order to drive their vaccination programs. They have to take into account the prevalence of the pandemic, the prioritisation of different populations within their countries, so that they can make the best decisions based on availability of the various vaccines to drive their vaccination campaign. Our role is to provide objective scientific evidence which they can then use in making their policy decisions on vaccination campaigns. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Sweeney. The next question is from Ludwig Burger from Reuters. Ludwig, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. My question is on the potential side effects. You mentioned it was well tolerated. Is there anything in the adolescent metabolism that makes you think there needs to be particular caution or surveillance or vigilance, that goes beyond what you're doing in adults? Or indeed, is there any reason to assume that there may be different mechanisms, at play in children and adolescents than there are in adults? Because, of course, our experience on adults is much longer than the limited experience on children, I take it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cavalieri, please.
Yeah, I think for the adolescents in general, we would assume, and based on the experience that we gathered with many other vaccines throughout the years, is that pretty much what we see in young adults is also seen in adolescents. So we don't think at this point in time that there is any reason to believe that something different will happen in this age group compared to what we are seeing in young adults. Of course, the more we were going down with age, the more might be possible that something different could happen, and that's why we will assess the data as they come along to really understand if there is any difference that would be notable and will be worth further investigations.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Maria Psara from Greek EFSIN TV. Maria, please.
Hello, thanks for the floor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so it's Maria Psara with Open TV Greece. I have two questions, actually. The first one, besides Pfizer BioNTech, has any other company applied for approval of its vaccine to adolescents? I would like to be sure. And the second question, actually, I would like your opinion on some studies that have been presented recently. First of all, the German scientists say they can help improve COVID vaccines to prevent blood clots. And then tomorrow studies say that immunity could last a year or maybe a lifetime. Are you in contact with those scientists, and do you have any answer on these, any comment on these researches? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I'm giving these two questions to Dr. Marco Cavalieri.
Yeah, with respect to your first question, as you know, Moderna issued a press release not long ago talking about the key results from their study in adolescents. So we are looking forward receiving an application from Moderna as well that hopefully we will be able to evaluate in the coming weeks and come up with an opinion as soon as possible. At the moment, there are no other pediatric plans ongoing, at least for the vaccine that are authorized in the EU. But as you know, we have a paediatric committee that has been discussing with all the companies the content of the paediatric plan, and we will follow up in due course. With respect to your second question, indeed, we have read the papers coming from the research groups in Germany about the TTS, and we are in touch with them. So we are working with the academic community together also with the company in order to advance our understanding on the pathophysiology of this rare adverse event. And with respect to immunity, we also read these important data that we showed that indeed protection could last for 1 year or longer. And so, as said at the beginning, we are trying to gather all this information and discuss with investigators and the companies the way forward for any potential booster strategy in the future.
The next question comes from Susan Ritson from Swedish TV SVT. Susan, please.
Thank you. I have two questions too, and one is concerning another. There are rising cases in the U.S. where they are reporting children being vaccinated that have inflammatory heart diseases, and I wonder on your opinion on that and the risks going forward, since they seem to be worried about that in the U.S. And also the Swedish Pediatric Association in Sweden says today that they think that the studies that have been made on children and adolescents are too small to actually show any risks of unusual side effects. And I wanted you to comment on that too. Do you have enough studies to support this decision?
Thanks, Susan. So the first question on the inflammatory heart disease in children is going to be responded to by Dr. Georgi Genov, and the second one by Dr. Cavalieri.
Thank you for the question. We've communicated in May that our safety committee, the PRAC, is investigating cases of myocarditis and pericarditis. We don't believe at this stage this is a confirmed signal. However, we are closely monitoring data. We are also working closely with FDA, CDC colleagues, MHRA colleagues, WHO colleagues, in order to leverage experience, but also have access to global data on these rare cases. Now, for context, myocarditis and pericarditis occur in the general population. So these are people that have not been vaccinated, mostly due to viral infection. And interestingly, in males aged 18 to 24, it's where we see the highest incidence rate. So in summary, our safety committee is carefully reviewing all the reports. At this stage, we don't see an increase of cases that have been observed compared to the cases that one would expect in the general population. But of course, we'll keep you updated on any outcome of the deliberation of the safety committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Genov. Now, Dr. Cavalieri, on the size of the studies.
Yeah, the size of the trials, of course, are not able to detect rare adverse events. And, of course, here the assessment has taken into account the entirety of the evidence from a safety perspective in also young adults. And as you know, this vaccine is authorized from the age of 16. So, as already mentioned, we have been also looking into what the pharmacovigilance data are telling us. But of course, once the vaccine will be deployed, it will be important to continue monitoring the performance of the vaccine and to determine if there is any safety issue that will be emerging. And that is only possible in the context, indeed, of these pharmacovigilance activities, as the size of the trials it's enough to determine the overall profile of adverse event just a few days after administration of the vaccine, but indeed not to detect rare adverse events.
Thank you very much. I'm now taking a question of Luis Tovar from Telecinco Spanish TV. Luis. Luis, do you hear us?
Yeah, you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's one question concerning AstraZeneca and the second dose. Countries like Spain are recommending to switch to mix the first dose of AstraZeneca with another vaccine, with a Pfizer in that case. So what do you think about this decision? Because you've always said that AstraZeneca is a safe and effective vaccine, so could be a risky decision to switch and to mix both vaccines? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cavalieri, please.
This indeed is a very important topic that is under discussion right now. And as you know, there are at least 2 clinical trials that already deliver some data with respect to the possibility of mixing and matching 2 different vaccines, and in particular the AstraZeneca together with the messenger RNA vaccine. So one study is being conducted in the UK, another one that has already delivered some data is coming from Spain. And from what we heard so far, these data are showing that there are no major concerns with such an approach from a safety perspective, and also the few data that we have seen are showing that also from an immunogenicity side, it seems like this is really an effective approach in order to generate a robust immune response after the second dose of a different vaccine. However, we will be looking to collecting more evidence, and we will be scrutinizing all these studies in order to make sure that this approach is indeed as good as it may seem.
Thank you very much. The next question now is from Victoria English from MedNu. Victoria.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'm just following up the earlier question on the German study to ask if you can give us your latest data on the incidence of the rare blood clots. And secondly, is it correct that these incidents only have been reported with vaccines that use an adenovirus vector?
Thank you very much. This question is for Dr. Genov, who is going to respond.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, the risk of TTS, thrombosis and thrombocytopenia syndrome, has been identified for AstraZeneca and for Janssen vaccine. For the Janssen vaccine, we have in Europe currently 2.1 million vaccinated and only 1 possible case of TTS. For AstraZeneca, we've previously given you figures around mid-April, and we have looked at the trends of reports. So since April, mid-April, we have an additional 19 million vaccinated have received at least 1 dose of AstraZeneca. We, of course, received additional reports. What is important to note is that the frequency of those of occurrence of this rare event, which is approximately 1 in 100,000, has not changed. And another important observation is the fatality rates. Unfortunately, some of those events were fatal. The fatality rate has decreased, which possibly indicates that the awareness of vaccinated people and treating physicians to early diagnose and treat this condition have reduced the unfortunate fatal event. So thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Antje Höning from German daily Rheinische Post. Antje?
Thank you very much. I have 2 questions. Can you tell us if the children get the same doses, the same volume than the adults? And the second question, the German expert commission STIKO, Ständige Impfkommission, will allow the vaccine only for ill children. Can you give us a hint why, or can you understand this? What is different? How could it be that we have different opinions in this point? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Cavalieri.
Yeah, so for your first question, the dose is indeed the same as the one used in adults. the dose that has been approved, and there will be lower doses tested, but only in younger children below the age of 12. With respect to your second question, as mentioned, is a prerogative of each individual member state to decide how to use this vaccine and even if to use this vaccine in an adolescent population. And of course, it's up to them to decide whether they want to restrict the use just in adolescents that are at high risk of COVID-19 because of comorbidities or other factors versus using this vaccine in a broader population. So the approval is covering the entirety of the adolescent population, but we could understand that the benefit risk in subjects that are at higher risk of COVID-19 would be even higher.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Gretchen Vogel from the Science magazine. Gretchen?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, please go. Thank you. Yeah, it actually was asked the question, or a similar question was asked before I had a chance to get to my question, but I wondered if there are any clear new total numbers on the cases of TTS in the European area. You mentioned that there have been a number of new cases reported and a lot more vaccines, and that it's about 1 in 100,000, but can you give us any particular numbers? And then also a question on the possible heart inflammation in connection with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Do you have any numbers to report on the number of cases that have been reported there? And any age breakdown? In other places, it seems that it's been more common in younger people.
Thank you. Dr. Genov, please.
Okay, thank you. Before we go into the numbers, maybe a few words to be able to understand better those numbers. So the numbers that I will give you refer to cases of thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. So the reports we received, these are spontaneous reports, we rely on the information provided by patients and healthcare professionals. So some of those reports will be well documented, and we can well establish that this is a true case of TTS, thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome. In other cases, we would not have sufficient information to confirm that case. However, this is, if you wish, the worst case scenario. All cases with thrombosis and thrombocytopenia, independent if there are additional lab data that would make the case confirmed available or not. So, on the 13th of April, we gave you a number of 142 cases. So this is thrombosis with thrombocytopenia. Some of those will be confirmed, some might not, some might lack sufficient information. And this was, at the time, we had 17 million vaccinated with AstraZeneca. Now, yesterday, so this is cases from the European Economic Area, we have 316 cases, so that is an additional 174 cases. But importantly, we have an additional 19 million vaccinees that have received the first dose. A few additional millions have received the second dose, but with the first dose, this is additional 19 million. So that indicates that the frequency remains of the reporting, certainly in the European Economic Area, within the range that we've previously provided. And again, importantly, the reduction of mortality, it's a good sign and highlights further the need of awareness to early diagnose and treat that condition. So I think that's on the first question. The second question related to numbers, again for myocarditis. Say similarly as for the numbers for TTS, these are cases that we have received in our spontaneous reporting system, usual vigilance. Some of those might be confirmed myocarditis, others might not be well documented to have a diagnostic certainty. So for Comirnaty, so that is Pfizer vaccine, where we have the higher number of cases, we have in the European Economic Area, we have 107 cases. This is around 55% of males and a median age of 41 years of age. So if we look at reporting rates, and that again you need to understand could fluctuate over time. We are talking about one case in 745,000. Just to give you as a comparison, what is expected in the general population, so these are people that have not been vaccinated but could have experienced myocarditis or pericarditis for a variety of reasons, as I said, viral infection being the main one. We would expect around 10 in 100,000. And there's a difference within of this what we call incidence rates in the general population depending on the age. So the highest incidence range we have is in a male, young male between 18 and 24 years of age, and there one can expect up to around 23 cases in 100,000. And this is without vaccination. This is in the general population for a variety of reasons. So I think that's probably sufficient numbers for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Corinne Gretler from Bloomberg. Corinne.
Hi. I just have a quick one. I was wondering if you could give an update on the status of the review of the CureVac vaccine. How far along are you with that, and when do you think you'll be able to share an opinion?
Thank you very much. Dr. Cavalieri, please.
So, as you know, the CureVac vaccine is under rolling review, and as you know, there is a large phase 3 clinical trial that is currently ongoing in different parts of the world. So we are waiting for the result of this pivotal study to be delivered before we can really understand what could be the time frame for a potential approval of this vaccine. We really hope that this data will be emerging pretty soon, but we cannot tell you precisely at this stage, and we are looking forward to receiving this data. Only once we will have this data, we will then be able to define a more precise timetable with respect to an approval of this vaccine.
Thank you very much. I'm now taking a question from Tommaso Lecco from Italian news agency AGI. Tommaso.
Yes, thank you for the floor. I have a question for Dr. Cavalieri regarding the origins of COVID-19. The US President Joe Biden on Wednesday has directed the US intelligence to redouble their efforts in investigating the origins of the pandemic. And it is clear that the US, both the US scientific community and the US administration are not satisfied with the investigations carried out so far. And moreover, it was recently reported that 3 researchers from China's Wuhan Institute of Virology became sick and were hospitalized in November, some weeks before the COVID was identified as a threat. I would like to understand, as part of the European scientific community, are you fully satisfied with the results of the investigations carried out so far by the Chinese authorities and WHO? And second question, if I may, at this stage, do you feel confident enough to rule out that the laboratory spillover as an origin of the virus? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tommaso. I'm going to give this question to Dr. Sweeney. It's a rather political question. Thanks.
So, thank you very much for the question. No, we're aware of these discussions that are ongoing, but it's really not the role of the European Medicines Agency to be involved in such investigations. So we can't offer any further comment or view on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now taking a question of Frank Jordans from Associated Press. Frank, please go ahead.
Trial version.
Frank, do you hear us?
Trial version.
This does not seem to work, so we take another question first and wait until Frank is online. So I'm now taking a question from Iman Rachidi from EFE, the Spanish news agency. Imane?
Hi. Good afternoon. I would like to follow up on a previous question. Do you keep your positive recommendation in the use of a second dose of AstraZeneca in those who got the first one, or are there any new concerns in that sense, especially after the reports of new thrombocytopenia cases in the European Union?
Dr. Cavalieri can take this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so indeed the recommendation with respect to the AstraZeneca vaccine is to give a second dose. There is now a contraindication for those that experience thrombosis after the first dose, but this is the only addition. So the recommendation is remaining the same. And as mentioned earlier by Dr. Genov, we are looking into data from pharmacovigilance in terms of understanding whether there is incidence of TTS after a second dose. But for the time being, we have not seen anything worrisome in this respect.
Thank you very much. We are now trying again Frank Jordans from Associated Press.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Right. So, as I'm sure you know, the issue of administering vaccines to children is particularly sensitive, in some quarters especially, so probably more so than giving vaccines to adults. So what assurance can the EMA give the parents who might be hesitant about vaccinations that all of the same safety reviews have been undertaken as with other vaccines? Or were there any, let's say, shortcuts taken in the process, and how do you justify them?
Dr. Cavalieri, please.
Yeah, so I think it is very important to ensure that the vaccines, when they are given particularly in vulnerable groups and particularly in pediatric population, we have sufficient evidence that they are safe and effective. And as you know, many vaccines are authorized for use in the pediatric population, which are one of the primary targets for vaccination in many cases. And therefore, that's why we keep special attention in making sure that the evidence that we gather is sufficient to reassure on the safety of this vaccine. And on top of this, we have a pediatric committee that is precisely there to define with the companies what is the content of the clinical trials that will have to be conducted in order to ensure that sufficient evidence on the safety and efficacy of this vaccine is available at time of approval. Of course, as said, there might be instances in which the clinical trials that would be sufficient to support approval might not be able to detect rare adverse events, and that's why it's so important that we have a good monitoring system in place in Europe and beyond in order to detect these rare adverse events as soon as they occurred. And I have to say that what we've seen in these months is that really the European system has been at the front line in being able to detect any adverse event that has been emerging after vaccination with COVID-19 vaccines.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavalieri. And this was the last question we are taking today. Thank you very much for your participation today. And as always, if you have any additional questions, please follow up with our press office at press@ema.europa.eu. And as I said at the beginning, this was our second regular press briefing, and we have already received some very positive feedback from some colleagues. But we are still interested in any additional comments, so please get back to us and let us know whether these are useful for you. So we look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for today, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.